Hello, everybody. This is the Kubernetes community meeting. Today is April 11th, 2019. Welcome, everybody. It's great to have you. Thanks for being here. My name is Lachlan Evenson. I'm a PM at Microsoft, and this is my first time hosting the Kubernetes community meeting. So thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here, as you can tell. I'm even putting on my best Australian accent. So thanks for being here. We've got a wonderful lineup today. First order of business is just some housekeeping. Just letting you know that this meeting is being streamed live to YouTube as we speak. So please consider your choice of words and treat everybody with respect. Also, if you're not speaking, if you could pop yourself on mute, that would be fantastic as well, so that the people that are speaking can get their message across. I am going to... Oh, I get a little bit of feedback there. There we go. I'm going to put the agenda in the chat for everybody there. We have a packed and fantastic agenda this morning that I'm really excited to take everybody through. And we've already had a volunteer to take notes. So I'd like to give a shout out to Solly Ross over at Google. Thanks, Solly, for taking notes. We really appreciate it. So let's get into this packed agenda. First cab off the rank is a fantastic demo. And it's by Patrick Lang. Patrick Lang is a senior software engineer at Microsoft and SIG Windows co-chair. So I'd like to hand it over to Patrick Lang, and he's going to be taking us through a demo of what's new in Windows containers in Kubernetes. So thank you, Patrick.
All right, thank you, Lockie. So first off, I'm going to start off with something that should be familiar. Oh, come on. First, we get to see whether or not I can actually type, just so you know that it's live. Okay, so late yesterday, I built up a cluster. I happen to be working on Azure, and so I used a tool called AKS Engine. But what I did was I deployed a Kubernetes 14 cluster. But what's different about this cluster is not only does it have nodes running Ubuntu, I also have a few nodes running Windows Server in it. And so what's great about this is that that means that I'll be able to, within the single cluster, deploy both Windows and Linux workloads. And since this is all using the same consistent Kubernetes API, I can actually manage all of this either from Linux, OS X, or Windows, all using the same familiar tools like Kube Control and one of my favorites, Helm. So first off, I'll just show a really quick deployment before I kick this off. So there's nothing really particularly different about deploying a Windows app, other than the fact that the container image that I'm deploying, it happens to be a Windows app. And then because I've got multiple OSs in my cluster, I'm using node selectors to make sure that the workload lands on the appropriate node. So right now I'm using node selectors because all the things I'm going to use in my demo have them set. But if you wanted to introduce Windows nodes into an existing cluster, but you didn't have the OS set for your Linux workloads, you could instead choose to taint the Windows nodes, and then nothing will get scheduled to them, and then you just add the toleration on the Windows workloads. But for today, I'm going to be using node selectors here. So the first thing I'm going to do is deploy just a really simple web server, and I intentionally left the service already running so I wouldn't have to wait on it to get a public IP. Okay, so looking at this, it's currently scheduled a pod. This is over on one of the Windows Server nodes over here. And see if that's running. Well, if that one's going to take too long to start, I might as well just go ahead and deploy this up. Okay, now it's a race to see, okay, that one's running. All right, so now that's running. I'm able to use the same standard services. This load balancer here is the default one that was deployed by Azure, but if I wanted to use something with an ingress controller using Nginx, those workloads can run on Windows or Linux nodes. It doesn't matter because the cluster IPs used for all the services are still routable across the entire Kubernetes cluster. It can run anywhere. And then so going to that public IP, I've got the web server up and running. If you want to try hitting it, feel free. But that's just a quick sample of what this looks like, from someone that's administering stuff on a Linux machine, but deploying Windows workloads in addition to Linux workloads. And also, before I get off of this, the other thing I want to call out is that all the pods that are scheduled as part of Cube system are still running just fine on the Linux nodes there. So that does show that I've got things running on both Linux and Windows right now. So now to make things a little bit more interesting, I'm going to hop on over to Windows VM that I have up and running. And so over here, I've got a project that's available out on GitHub, but this is a .NET application that is built using .NET framework. Yeah, so I'll just quickly show the Docker file here. So, this Docker file is, of course, using the Microsoft.NET framework base image that's published there. And then I'm just configuring an application pool and then adding in the things that were built. So when I built this code, I built it, within Microsoft Visual Studio, the same way as if I was going to build and test it locally, but I'm just packaging up the end binaries in a Docker container. And then to actually deploy this, I'll go ahead and deploy it from a Helm chart that I've already written here. So let's get that started. And then this Helm chart that I'm deploying actually has two different modes of operation. If I were to run this in production, I would go ahead and use Service Catalog to actually deploy my SQL Server. But since I'm going to run it on this little dev cluster that I set up, I've got it set up to actually go ahead and run SQL Server on one of the Linux nodes. So that's going to register a service, and then it's going to run the Windows web application over on one of the Windows nodes. So let's check my status of, Altered Ladybug. That's a good one. All right, so now I have the two pods running. They're, of course, going to be on different nodes, and I'm still waiting on an external IP. So let's just give that a second here. Okay, so now I have that. Let's hop on over to a web browser. So the first time I load this, since I did a development deployment, it's going to take just a little bit of time. The reason why is that this application was actually designed using the code first pattern with the entity framework. And so if it ends up with an empty database, then what it will do is it will actually create that database the first time it connects using the appropriate schema. And so if I go look at the database logs, somewhere in there, let me find it. We should see the steps where it logs in and created that. Double check they got the right IP there. And of course, this is a situation where, it works 5 times in a row and then you wait 12 hours and then something changed. And
Hey, Patrick,
yep,
we just have about 2 minutes left on the
yep,
demo. How about we open it up for any questions while we wait for that to
yep,
finish? Does that make
yeah,
sense?
yeah,
So
go right ahead.
Patrick can field any questions that you have. There we go.
Do you have any questions on the chat window that I should pull up or?
No, not currently. If anybody
Okay.
has any questions, feel free to ask either in the chat or verbally. Okay, no questions on the line, Patrick. So,
All right. So anyway, I'm opening up trouble tickets, got my app working, just the way I was expecting it to with the Windows and Linux stuff, all running side by side, and I'm able to use the same management tools, whether I'm on Windows or Linux or Mac OS, to deploy applications on both Windows and Linux all in the same cluster. So, so that's it for now.
fantastic. Thanks, Patrick. Really appreciate you showing up and giving us a fantastic demo.
Oh, no problem. And all the source links are there in the notes for today.
Appreciated, very much appreciated. So all the links that Patrick just showed to build that demo are actually in the agenda there. If you're interested in building your own version of that demo or taking a look. And obviously Windows went GA, Windows nodes went GA in 1.14. Is that correct, Patrick?
Yes, it is.
Fantastic. Thank you
Yep.
very much. So everybody give Patrick a round of golf/seal claps. Thank you very much. We very much appreciate it. Okay, we're going to move on now to release update section. Do we have Claire Lawrence on the line? Claire is the current release manager.
Yes.
Hi, Claire.
I am here. All right, so giving an update on 1.15. So the 1.15 release cycle officially began on Monday. We had our first meeting, and things that have been happening most of this week is we've been working on getting the schedule finalized, and it is available in the GitHub repo for the release on the README, which I'll drop a link to in the chat. A possible update if I'd mentioned it on last week's call, but this is going to be an 11-week cycle. I had originally thought we were going to GA on June 24th and then realized that was the start of KubeCon Shanghai, so then moved it back a week to June 17th. So we would not be releasing during a large community conference. Some additional upcoming milestones that might be interesting for folks. We're going to start enhancements tracking next week. So Kendrick, who is the enhancements lead, should be starting to go through the GitHub issues for any items that want to be included in the 1.15 milestone. If your SIG has any items that they're hoping to get on the 1.15 milestones for enhancements, as a friendly reminder, you must have a KEP in an implementable state by enhancements freeze. An enhancements freeze is on April 30th. You must also have an open issue in the 1.15 milestone for that. And for the KEPs, another friendly reminder, we would really like to have testing plans and graduation criteria in them. Having these testing plans and graduation criteria is really helpful in terms of evaluating how ready each enhancement is for when it's going to be released. Other dates coming up that are worth noting is on April 16th, so next Tuesday, we're hoping to have our 1.15 Alpha 1 released. And then we're going to start the release notes draft on the following Tuesday, April 23rd. Any questions?
No, it doesn't look like it. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Claire, for the update. Very much appreciated. There is also some patch release updates in there. I think the first 1.14 patch went out earlier this week. And a few others are planned. So please take a look at the agenda for more there. Now we go over to the contributor tip of the week, and we have George who's going to be doing that. So I will hand it over to George. You have the floor, George. Maybe not. There he is.
Yes,
Thank you. Woo!
Sorry.
That's okay.
Struggling with the share. Okay, can everyone see this? So
Yes.
this is going to be a real quick one. If you go to cs.cates.io, this is called Hound. This is Dim's thing, and I'm sure others have been working on it. But it stands for codesearch.cates.io. I was wondering, what am I responsible for in owners files? Because I have no idea. And sometimes I get things assigned to me in GitHub that I have no idea how I ended up on there. So I decided, you know what? Let me take a look. So you could just type your name in here, and it will accept any regex. And I started to find out all the owners files that I am mentioned in. And there's a bunch of stuff in here that I haven't worked in a while, like this one. And just wanted to remind everybody that you can just put your name into this thing and kind of do a little audit of yourself to make sure that what you're actually working on is reflected in owners files. And if not, you can initiate, if you're in an owners file and you don't think you should be, you can go ahead and reach out to the other people who are reviewers and approvers there to update that. So that is your tip of the week. As soon as I figure out how to stop sharing. Okay, there we go. Any questions on cs.cates.io? Cool, thanks.
Thank you, George. That was very informational. I haven't done that. I need to go do that myself. Now we move on to the KEP of the week. So this may be of some kind of surprise, but the KEP of the week, I'm going to go and share my screen here. Let me know when you can see it. See it? Yes, it's actually Jeffrey who's sitting in a room. You are the KEP of the week, Jeffrey. So this KEP, so I'll just take folks through just KEPs at a high level quickly, but under Kubernetes enhancements is the repository you're looking for. You will actually find a whole bunch of issues and pull requests relating to KEPs. So here we have a pull request for release notes improvements, and I'll quickly just take you through what we have here. So it was suggested by Jeffrey. So here we actually have the PR, which contains the KEP. If I move my little window, we can actually just look at what this looks, take a look at this. But this KEP specifically goes about defining a new site for end users to better consume the generated data with regard to release notes. So I would urge everybody who loves taking a look at the release notes, and the release team does a fantastic job of creating these. There's Jeffrey's actually proposing changes to this process, and you can come in and take a look at what they might be, and feel free to comment. Jeffrey, did I miss anything? Put you on the spot here, but you are the KEP of the week.
Not particularly, but I'm also going to post a link to the kind of demo site for end users. It is just a subset of the 114 release notes, but it gives a good idea of where I want to try and take things.
Fantastic, thanks. And thank you for the wonderful KEP. All right, so that takes us over to SIG updates. Now, this is the time in the meeting where we have several SIGs come in, chairs from different SIGs, and provide updates about what they're working on currently. So our first SIG chair, we have Chris Hodge from
Yes.
SIG Cloud Provider. I will invite you to the floor. Hey, Chris, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Wonderful. Take it away. Thank you.
All right. I will share my screen here. All right. So the slides are showing okay?
Perfectly. Thank you.
All right. Fantastic. Okay. So my name is Chris Hodge, and I'm with SIG Cloud Provider. I'm also here with the co-leads, Andrew Sai Kim and Jago McLeod. McLeod? How do I say that? Speaking of last names. And here to give the SIG Cloud Provider update. So just a brief, I guess, talking about our mission a little bit for those who don't know, the SIG Cloud Provider is kind of the parent SIG of all of the individual providers. And our goal is to work on things within Kubernetes that are common across all of the different cloud providers. And in particular, how cloud providers are loaded and used, and and shared documentation and things that are, are kind of interest to all of the groups. So for the last cycle, we've actually, the biggest thing that we've been working on is the Kubernetes cloud provider extraction and migration. Our tech leads on this have been Mike Crute and Walter Fender. And right now it's our highest priority. And the idea is Kubernetes is meant to serve as kind of an application orchestration kernel. And rather than have the functionality for all of the different providers and all of the different tools in there, instead it can load that functionality and provide the services with different, give services with different providers. But as it stands right now, there are a number of different cloud providers that are actually deeply integrated into the Kubernetes code base. And we're working on moving all of those providers out. So that means that we need to do a few things. The first is we need to have an interface for those cloud providers to interact with, and that work is pretty much mostly done. That's the Cloud Controller Manager, and there are all sorts of providers that you can load into Kubernetes as external providers right now. But for the providers that are within Kubernetes, there are many of them have integrated fairly deeply. And we're working to remove all of those internal dependencies and things on code, migrate those to staging so that all of the providers can be removed from that code in a clean way that's not going to break existing users, and also provide some sort of migration path. So we've had a pretty long work list on this. It's still in progress, and it remains our highest priority for 1.15. But if you take a look at some of the accomplishments, there's actually a pretty long list of things that people have worked on and that we've done on moving this out. Right now on this list, there's actually only one thing that isn't completed. Now, that doesn't mean that the work is done. There's still a lot ahead of us to do. But it's been moving along really quickly, and there's been a tremendous amount of effort and work put into that. And I want to take a moment to say thanks to all of the contributors who've been working on those issues. This certainly isn't a full list, but it's a list of the people who have taken ownership of those issues and provided different implementation paths for that. So what's next for 1.15? Well, another one of our big projects that we're working on right now is restructuring all the different cloud provider SIGs into something else. We presented, we made a proposal which is linked in this slide deck, and we can also add to the links within the meeting notes. That was presented to the steering committee yesterday at their public meeting. Breaking down the proposal, there are a few major points. The first is that all of the SIG cloud providers, and so this would be like SIG OpenStack, SIG GCE, SIG Azure, SIG AWS, they're going to transition to be sub-projects under SIG cloud provider. This is going to involve a lot of different change happening throughout the organization, such as changing labels to, provider-cloud provider, or tags to provider/the cloud provider name. Now, all of the cloud providers certainly enjoy all the benefits of the SIGs, and these include things like time at conferences, Slack channels, being able to use the CI. Our proposal is that these don't change entirely. So for example, we're going to have quarterly updates for the cloud providers at community meetings. We're also requesting space at community events like Cloud Native Con and KubeCon. And also just access to things like, following the release standards, and participating within test grid reporting, and and having documentation and making the documentation consistent. But there's so much more than this. So if you're interested in seeing it, you should go take a look at the proposal. Feel free to comment on it. It was largely accepted during the meeting yesterday. So we're going to be moving forward to implement this with our plan to have a full implementation by KubeCon 2019. And I want to give a special thanks to Nishi Davidson for driving this proposal forward. And she and Andrew presented it yesterday. We've been working for quite a while on this. So thank you for that. What else is happening in 1.15? We have a bunch of things in progress that we're going to be working on, such as improving the API server network proxy to replace the deprecated SSH tunnel system that's required for removing the in-tree cloud provider. There's work on an out-of-tree image credential provider. This work was kicked off by AWS. To help keep the refactoring from breaking their dependency on the cloud provider. And we're looking at the next step of a KEP and an alpha implementation for version 1.15, as well as the ongoing task of improving cloud provider documentation. Within our list of tasks for this cycle, all of the owners of the different cloud providers have been assigned to these as highest priority for work to get done in 1.15. As well as migrating HA clusters to use the Cloud Controller Manager. One of the tricky things about this is group leader election is not as efficient as it could be for HA. Walter could go into some depth about what this is, but basically if a new leader is elected, the old leader has to kill all of its old processes because you can't know if processes have been spawned that are going to then create race conditions. So we're looking at possible ways to improve our usability, our performance on that. Okay, as I talked about earlier, in-tree cloud providers are going away. So our goal is to have all of the in-tree providers to have a migration path out of Kubernetes by the end of the year. So if you are producing a project right now where you have a choice between the in-tree or the external provider, start using the external provider. If your provider there and it's supported and it exists, making that transition should be fairly easy for you. But there are actually a lot of products out there that are maybe running clouds right now that use the providers and they use the in-tree provider, and it's not going to be as easy to make that transition because you might have customers who are actively using Kubernetes clusters that depend upon that. So we're working on building out the tooling to make that a smooth transition. If you want to get involved in that and help out, that would be fantastic. There's a KEP that's being set up for that to move that forward. Finally, if you depend upon the Overt, CloudStack, and Photon cloud providers, those have been deprecated and those are being removed. As far as we know, there isn't anybody right now who is maintaining those external providers. And so if you depend upon those, then please get in touch with us and get involved with implementing an external provider so that support will stay in place for all of you. When do we want to have this all done by? 2019 is a big year for us, and so we're looking to have it completed by the end of the year, by KubeCon San Diego. So we have lots of things that you can contribute to this cycle. I don't want to list them all here, but if you go to our Kubernetes repository, cloud provider/issues, you can see what's available to be done. But particularly documentation. If you are in a SIG and you want to help document, please, help with the documentation. And actually, I will list some of the things that are available right now. These are current tasks that are issues for the next cycle but haven't been assigned yet. So if you are looking to make some contributions, these would be some great places to get started, and you can come find us on over on Slack at SIG Cloud Provider. The chairs of the SIG are Andrew Sai Kim, Jago McLeod, and myself. But I also want to make sure that I mention the leadership of Nishi Davidson, Walter Fender, and Michael Kroot, who have all really put in a lot of work to help move a lot of these initiatives forward, and have really helped drive the SIG. We have an amazing group of people there, an amazing set of leadership, and it's been a joy to work with them. We have our homepage at at the Kubernetes Cloud Provider, the Slack channel at SIG Cloud Provider, as well as the mailing lists. If you want to join our meetings, we have biweekly meetings on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. And then if you want to be involved in the cloud provider extraction process, we have weekly meetings scheduled for Thursdays at 1:30 p.m. in Pacific time. And with that, I will open it to questions, or if I missed anything and Andrew wants to jump in, I'm happy to hear about that also.
I have nothing to add. I think you're doing a great job. Cover everything. Thanks.
There was one question by Joe in the chat, but I think Andrew's answered that.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, SIG Cloud Provider. Fantastic. Okay, so that takes us over to our next SIG update, which we have Daniel Smith, LavaLamp, running SIG API machinery. I'll hand it over to Daniel. Thank you, Daniel.
Hi.
Hello.
Give me a second to share my screen here. Right.
We got you. Thank you.
I think I should start at the beginning here. Hi, I'm Daniel Smith. I work for Google. My co-SIG chair is David Eads, Red Hat, and it's my turn today. So this is the API Machinery SIG update. That will start off with what did we do last cycle. The most notable thing, or at least the thing that may be the most happy, perhaps, is server-side apply is in alpha now. So if you have ever used the kubectl apply, give this a try. I think it's pretty great. There's some recorded demos in API Machinery SIG meetings if you want to see what it looks like. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. We've made some progress on our other goals. CRD schemas, they now get published into OpenAPI so that the discovery can work. At least that's an alpha. And we have a path to get storage migration that is of API objects, like when you update your Kubernetes version and versions change, we want to make sure all the things that are stored in etcd are in the new schema. So that is progressing. Plans for upcoming cycle. So the general overarching theme is make all the extensibility features GA. So as soon as possible, but definitely by the end of the year, if we can possibly do it. So apply. We'd like to get that to beta in this upcoming release. We've got a plan for it. There's an example cap out for adding union types. That is like one of. Maybe the best example in the Kubernetes API is like all the long list of volume types that you can put in a volume. So we'd like to regularize that and make it easier for clients that are possibly on a different version of the schema to work. Yeah, so go read that cup if you're interested in that. So CRD conversion webhooks. Those are going to beta very soon, and then they will go to GA along with CRDs, which is the next line item. Is we'd really like CRDs to exit beta and go to GA. So there will be a KEP for this very shortly. Yeah, that's super important to us. Yeah, basically all extensibility features, whether those are admission webhooks, CRDs, anything you can think of, we want it to go to GA. A couple other things that we're working on, security features, proxying or allowing you the ability to proxy traffic from API server. Right now, API server traffic it drops onto the network and with no no guarantee about the destination. So you don't know, is this a packet intended for etcd? Is it a packet intended for a node in the cluster? So we're going to add a classification system so that in the unlikely event that somebody tricks your API server into emitting a network request that it shouldn't, that will get classified with the path that it was intended to go to and will not be able to talk to something that it shouldn't. Right? Basically, you won't be able to sneak in a call to etcd that was, if your traffic was really intended to go to some webhook. So there's a KEP, it's not implementable yet, but it was just like the first draft was approved and merged, so you can go look at that. That's Walter Fender's driving that. Somebody could ask me a question here. No? Okay. And the last thing on the list, the last but not least, we're working on rate limiting. This is like capping or intelligently capping, hopefully intelligently capping the number of requests that come into API server. Right now it's just a blanket, like if we have 400 requests in flight, like start rejecting them. So we're gonna try and distribute that more fairly so that a bad actor can't consume all of the available request quota. So that's 5 or 6 of us have been having fairly regular design meetings on that over the last couple months. That is Min Kim, Mike Sprites, myself, Aaron Prendel. Yeah, so if you're interested in that, subscribe to our mailing list and go look at the caps. There's like 3 or 4 cap PRs out about this. So yeah, I think it's going to be pretty neat. How these plans affect you? Extensibility plans, we're finalizing them any minute now. So yeah, if you're interested in this or you vitally need some feature, some extensibility thing, get in touch very soon. Show up on our mailing list, come to the SIG meeting. Yeah, if you want input, now is the time. Don't wait. The template now had was supposed to give a status update for every subproject. As you can see, we have a lot of subprojects. So instead of that, I'm just going to list them all. Yeah, I think API machinery maybe makes more heavy use of subprojects than other SIGs. So I will just explain what they are so that if you're interested in contributing, you know where to go look. First on the list, and this list is, I don't think it's in a particular order, server binaries. So API server, controller manager, cloud controller manager, and then supporting libraries. And again, this is not necessarily the contents. Like we don't own every individual API. We don't own every individual controller, but the enclosure that they run in seems to be owned by the SIG. We do own a few particular APIs and a few particular controllers, and those are rolled up in the control plane features subproject. So like the garbage collector, the namespace lifecycle controller, the quota system, the upgrade system, the storage migrator, we own those. We also own universal machinery, like the API machinery package. If you've ever interacted with Client Go, you've probably seen this in your import list. This is aspects of our API machinery that are necessary for both client and server. Server frameworks, API server, which we use. Fun fact, the Kube API server binary actually runs 3 API servers. It runs the aggregator, the API server with the built-ins, and the extensions API server, which runs your CRDs. So not as commonly known as maybe we'd like it to be. So interesting. And those are all built off of this API server framework. CRDs, we own the extensions API server, which is the name of the thing that serves the CRDs. We own the aggregator, which is like the front door and permits you to like distribute APIs among different API server binaries, which is used to support the metrics API server, among other things. We own the server, what I've called the server SDK project, which is like samples and tools to help you build APIs and API servers. They have a separate meeting for KubeBuilder and the controller runtime. I can share these slides later because you can't read this link, but if you go to, actually I can click on it. If you go to this page, the Kubernetes community SIG API machinery, you can see they have links. What else? There's a whole aspect of our API system, which is taking schemas and turning those into useful things like clients. We have Django, which is this library that I guess it was me that I started way back in the early days of Kubernetes that parses Go files and helps you generate output. We have code generators built off of that do like the deep copy generators and all that stuff. And we have the structured merge diff library, which is something we wrote to support the new apply. We put all the business logic there so that it will be easy to use in other contexts. The Kubernetes client subproject has a really long list, like 10, 15 different clients. So yeah, I think our newest addition is Perl. I guess some people really want a Perl client. I signed off on it with the expectation that I will not personally have to write any Perl, so you're all safe. And YAML, we have had to make some tweaks to a downstream YAML library, so that's where that lives. And component base is, I think, our newest subproject that is spinning up some common like flag management tools for all of our different binaries in our ecosystem. Okay, so that was a lightning tour of our subprojects. Again, for KEPs, I will not go through each one, but if you are interested, if you just look for KEPs with the label SIG API machinery, there's these PRs open. In particular, here's the one of KEP that I mentioned, and there's the rate limiting stuff is also goes by the names priority, fairness, concurrency. So you can see there are several of those. So if any of those things interest you, please go look at the KEPs and comment on them, or mention them on our mailing list. Working group status, apply. I already mentioned we have a roadmap for how to get apply to beta. So the team is executing on that, and yeah, it should be pretty cool. If you're interested in that, there is a separate working group apply meeting every other Tuesday morning Pacific time. Join the mailing list if you are interested. How can you contribute? We're going to try an experiment actually, and my team here at Google, we've been running bug triage meetings for like the last year and a half, and it occurred to us, actually it occurred to Fede the other day, well, why not open those up? So we're going to try an experiment. I will, at the risk of repeating myself, join our mailing list if you're interested in joining us with that. I think API machinery has somewhat difficult to understand issues, and we've mostly done the low-hanging fruit, so it can be difficult to interact with the project. And I think just sitting and watching us go through issues and learning by osmosis might actually not be a bad way to learn more. And last, where you can find us, I'm LavaLamp. You can also talk to David. There is the page that I already showed, Slack channel, mailing list. So I think that's all I had written. So if anyone has questions. Yeah.
No, I think that concludes it. Thank you very much, Daniel.
Thank you.
I wanted to thank both Daniel and Chris for providing wonderful SIG updates for us all in the community. Very much appreciated. I know a lot of time goes into making that update happen, so I just want to give them a round of applause. So thank you very much. This brings us to the last part of the stated agenda, which is announcements and then shout outs. So announcements, you can go to the agenda and look these up, but we have office hours next week. So they're on Wednesdays. If you're interested in getting involved in the office hours, please ping George. George, do you have any other comments about that?
Nope, all set to go.
All set to go. Thank you very much. There is also a link to a Windows containers Kubernetes poll. So the folks in SIG Windows are looking to learn more about Windows use cases. So if you are somebody that is interested or is already using Windows and Kubernetes, please go over and provide some feedback to SIG Windows as to how you're using that so that they can better assist and drive the roadmap for those use cases. Thank you very much. The link is in the agenda. Last announcement here is Cluster API now has a category for discussions if you want to join in. So there is a link there. Is that under discuss? George, I assume. Okay, so you can go over to discuss and start discussing all your Cluster API related issues. So thank you, George. Okay, so this brings us to shoutouts time. So for those who aren't aware, in the Kubernetes Slack, there's actually a shoutouts channel, and that shoutouts channel is about saying thank you to other people in the community for their help or tireless efforts. So if somebody has helped you, feel free to go pop into that channel and give them a shout out. And this, I will take a moment and actually pull out some of those shout outs from this week. So we have Valerie has a shout out to A Sky Kim for helping me get a kube proxy bug fix out the door. So I know Andrew's on this call. Thanks for that. I did see it in the 1.14.1 release notes there. So very much appreciated from Valerie. I have Jay Dedaba. Shout out to George, the one and only George, for getting us set up with a Cluster API discourse topic in no time at all. Thank you, George, for doing that. Another one from Jay Dedaba. Shout out to Catherine for helping out with the recent Boscos deployments we've needed for wiring up automated E2E tests for the Cluster API sub-project. So thank you, Catherine, for doing that. We also take a moment just to take a look at all the people on Stack Overflow that are answering the plethora of questions that are tagged with Kubernetes. So I'm going to call out just some of the top 10 answerers on the Kubernetes tag and thank them for their efforts there. So we have Frank Yucheng Gu, we have Eduardo Baitello, Rico, Cookie Dough, Janos Lennart, P. Ekambaram, Harsh Manva, we have 4C74356B41. Thank you for your efforts. A_Sue, Leandro Donizetti Soares. So thank you very much for helping out. And if you're on those, if you're in Stack Overflow, thank you for your tireless effort. There are a lot of questions in there if you've gone and taken a look or are using it. So nice usernames. Hopefully I read them okay and did the names justice. Apologies if not. So that is the end of the stated agenda. I will open it up just very quickly. Does anybody have anything they would like to add? Okay, I will take silence as a no. Well, thank you all for joining the Kubernetes community meeting for this week. Have a wonderful Thursday wherever you are on this beautiful planet. Bye-bye.
Great job, Lockie. See you, everyone.
Bye.